I got this comment asking me if I could rewrite the story of Bayonetta 3, what would it look like? Now, I'm not a writer, but I do have some ideas on how to make the plot more palatable. I want to make some rules for myself, even if these rules prevent me from doing something I really want to do instead. Number 1. The beginning and end of the game will stay the same. This is because I want to build off what is already there instead of wiping the slate clean. Number 2. No removing characters. All the characters that are there will continue to exist. What happens to them is up to me. Number 3. This is only going to focus on lore/plot changes. I won't be discussing gameplay or designs, even though there are things I'd want to change there too. With those 3 rules out of the way, I'll be categorizing my list of 3 by centering them on characters. Anyway, let's begin. I want to start with Luka. Luka is our journalist extraordinaire. He is well-meaning and always a great help to Bayonetta, helping where he can. I like Luka, and it's nice to see him grow into his role as a normal human who can keep up with a timeless witch. Oh wait. In this game, Luka is revealed to not be a normal human, but someone imbued with fairy lineage, which becomes more and more prevalent as Singularity destroys the multiverses and the arch-atoms within them. This is completely out of nowhere for him, and I don't think it benefits the lore or the story for him. I honestly think keeping him as a magicless human will be more compelling in a character standpoint because it allows his strength to be his journalism, intelligence, and his willingness to put himself in harm's way to help Bayonetta. Speaking of which, his relationship with Bayonetta. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I have to get into it. Does the relationship make sense? Yes and no. If you were to rank all of Bayonetta's romantic options, he'd be second. They both clearly care about each other, especially after Luka gets over thinking Bayonetta was an evil witch. It's implied that she's watched them grow since he kept pursuing her to learn the truth of what happened to his dad. Now, this relationship isn't completely out of nowhere, but it just feels way too rushed. They flirted in the first game, but Bayonetta flirts with everything in that game. In Bayonetta 2, she's more focused on saving Jean to really flirt with him, and their relationship isn't really expanded upon, so it's kinda stagnant at that point. This game, however, has her seemingly fall head over heels for him in a short period of time, and most of that time is spent away from each other. Sure, before the game's events they could have gotten more serious, but we never see that. It's also not a smooth experience to have two people instantly get this intense love for each other, because it doesn't feel real. What I would change for Luka first is to have him accompany Bayonetta and Viola. Luka doesn't need to be a fairy hybrid to give him reasons for showing up. Here's how it should happen. Luka's with the gang back in the gates of hell when Viola shows up. Jean is tasked with finding Sigurd like normal, while Luka is tasked with researching more on the multiverse and Thule. This will be how they know where to go to find Thule in this version of the multiverse, since that part isn't really explained. He was also on Thule when they got there, so at least now we'd know how he got there. We can still have that little moment in Japan, and then we can meet up again in China like normal. When they meet again in China, Luka can explain what he found on Thule and the multiverse and probably give some more lore on it. He would also be able to deduct that the reason for traveling to the places they go to is because they happen to be the next targets for Singularity. He may also be able to explain more in depth the concept of Arch-Atoms and Arch-Eves. Now at the moment we meet Luka, instead of saying nothing of value since the only real justification for him showing up is to hint further at the relationship between Viola and Luka. He will instead tell Viola that in order to stand a chance against the threat on the multiverse, the Arch-Atoms must all fuse together. Once Bayonetta, Luka, and Viola converge atop of Aureole, Lucaon will appear and Viola explains to Luka and Bayonetta what has to happen and they go through with the fusion. Lucaon then summons the rest of the Arch-Atoms to him and fuses with Luka first. This will cause Strider to appear for the first time out of control because Luka has never dealt with fairy magic before. This will lead to the fight against Strider. But this time, instead of Dark Atom manifesting from Luka somehow, they form together after all converging from their worlds. This time though, Luka is not knocked off the ledge and helps fight Dark Atom. After defeating Dark Atom, Luka absorbs him and then the game proceeds as normal. Alright, well that wraps up Luka's section, let's move on to the next. Next, I want to discuss Viola. Viola is the newest addition to the cast, and it looks like she's sticking around whether you like it or not. Viola is a witch in training who is the daughter of Luka and Bayonetta from a different part of the multiverse. I actually really like her aesthetic and energy, as it does paint a modern take on witches. However, her debut has left sour taste in plenty of fans' mouths. Let's start with her character. She's often portrayed as the comic relief, And I think it's fine for her to be a bit off or clumsy because she is in training and isn't fully confident yet, but it gets to be too much sometimes. Especially for someone who is now, until they release something else, Bayonetta. We don't get to see too much on how her life was growing up because the game is trying to save the big reveal of her parents, which is fairly obvious the further in you go. They fail to establish her to show why she is the way she is. I would think that because she's from a world with a resistance movement against singularity, she'd be more locked in. Another issue I have is that her being a fairy adds nothing of substance to the main story. She doesn't even get to showcase her newfound strength to her, not parents, during the big fight against singularity. She just keeps failing over and over again, and that's so irritating. I want to like her and cheer for her, but the game keeps trying to remind me why I shouldn't. I feel like I'm being a little harsh, but also I think that they just aren't giving her many wins for what's supposed to be like her debut. First impressions can be everything, unfortunately. They do give her at least one win at the very end of the game when she has a fight with Dark Eve. Now, before I say what I'm gonna say, I need to give some context. I really don't like this insistence of Viola calling this Bayonetta her mom. Technically, after the fusion of the Arch-Atoms, Luka is her dad now, but Bayonetta isn't her mom. I can understand how she misses her mother and is likely grieving, so that's why she's eager to have this Bayonetta in her place. But it does make me sad that we don't get any fond memories or words about her original mother. Now back to this fight. At the end, this scene happens where Bayonetta appears and she bestows the Bayonetta namesake onto Viola. Two things. One, Bayonetta would not appear from Dark Eve because she's currently in Inferno. And two, even if she was fused with Dark Eve, why would it be her and not her actual mother? I really don't like this scene because it feels like I missed something or no one is following the story. I just feel like we get no information on Viola's mother, even though she was a very big part of the opening sequence. I feel like this game makes more sense if Viola is coming from the future and not a separate universe. On to what I'd change. First of all, along with the changes to Luka, Viola is also no longer a fairy. I think the only way to keep her as a fairy is if we establish that her father was a fairy, and they barely acknowledge her mom, so we're not going to add her dad. I think what would be better is to have her become a full-fledged witch. So at the end of the game, she makes a contract with Cheshire, and then together they fight Singularity in a demon masquerade form. We could have an all-out fight with Viola, Luka, and Bayonetta attacking Singularity. I think this could potentially give Viola closure on losing her parents. Also, not only will this prove her power and worthiness to be the next Bayonetta, she will gain the self-confidence and strength to carry on after feeling like she lost her family twice. I also think if we delved more into Viola's bond with her mother, we could see the formation of a mother-daughter bond between Viola and Bayonetta because Bayonetta would be able to relate to the feeling of losing her parents. It would also make the sadness Viola feels at the end after losing them make even more sense. I just feel like my earlier idea of Luka joining them will also help with Luka and Bayonetta's parental bond with Viola, as well as the aforementioned relationship between Luka and Bayonetta. Aside from that, I don't really have a lot of notes on Viola. I think her personality is great, I think that she's fun, I think her gameplay sucks, but that's not the topic of today's video. Anyway, let's move on. Bayonetta seems to be the Arch-Eve in almost every reality. I'll be mainly talking about the main 5 we see. Design-wise, they're all very solid and all of them are recognizable as Bayonetta. Some of them are better than others, but that's inevitable. My actual issue with them is a very simple issue. Why are they all so bad? The first time we see an Arch-Eve, it's Viola's mother fighting a shadowy figure and losing. This makes us think, oh, Jubileus, this is a major threat. It sets the scene for what we assume is a major threat. Now, the next Arch-Eve we meet that isn't the main Bayonetta is found in Japan. She is known as the Street Smart Witch. Do we learn more about this title? Nope, but whatever, surely we'll get to know her considering we play as her. No again? Wow, well hopefully she shows how strong she is since she is the Arch-Eve of her world. What's that? She dies to a telegraphed attack from underground? Alright, now I know I'm being really harsh. Reading her Echo of Memory, it implies that she's a newly fully fledged witch, so she probably isn't the strongest witch compared to someone like Bayonetta Origin. Who's next? The One-Eyed Witch from China. She's a military general in her world. Do we see this? Super briefly when we get her Infernal Demon, but it could be interpreted as her rallying her fellow people instead of being their leader. But whatever, surely she is much more perceptive than the last Bayonetta since she is military trained, and I assume being a general makes her better at decisions and quick thinking. So how does she perish? A slowly moving hand grabs her while Bayonetta Origin just stands and watches. Sorry, she says. So the next Bayonetta isn't the Archive yet because she isn't ready to be one when we first arrive in Egypt. She is the Cloistered Witch because she is fittingly sheltered as a princess, and her retainer Jeanne, or the Unwavering Witch, helps train her so she can come out of that. I actually don't have a problem with Bayonetta or Jeanne in this realm because 1, I'm already used to the death that keeps happening, so Jeanne dying felt normal, and 2, the Egyptian Bayonetta sacrifices her life to save Bayonetta Origin, instead of her dying to something silly. We don't have to read the descriptions to know she's a princess, or her relationship with Jeanne, or her struggles. This is good, A+ Platinum Games. You see, I don't know if this makes her better than the others, or if this makes the others worse. On to the last of the ones we meet, the Phantom Thief Witch from... We see less development on her end compared to what we just had, but still more than the first two. We get to see a world where Bayonetta still has her mother. Their descriptions elaborate why they're thieves, since they're stealing ancient Umbran artifacts, which makes sense since Rosa in our realm had great pride in the Umbra, so she'd want to reclaim the ancient treasures of her clan as well as others. Anyway, back on topic. Clearly learning from the past, Bayonetta Origin actually warns the French Bayonetta about the Perlucidus coming from behind her, but everyone has bad reaction times in this game, so she succumbs to the mind control. Why do 3 of them die so unceremoniously? Why is Bayonetta Origin not quick to shoot down the threats against her other selves? Why don't we get to learn more about them if we're forced to spend time in their universe? Now let's get into the changes. So instead of killing the Archives, let's try something else. Something that happens at the end of the game, which is admittedly one of the coolest things to happen, is the fusion between 3 Bayonettas. Unfortunately, my change might cost this. Instead of dying, what if she learns she can fuse with other Bayonettas on her own? This way, we have a logical reason to use the weapons and demons they have without killing them, and have an in-game lore reason for her costumes being the other Bayonettas. Jeanne and Rosa from the other dimensions can still die and won't get their weapons the same way for plot reasons. The Bayonettas from Japan and China will willingly fuse with Bayonetta Origin. Bayonetta from Egypt will hesitate, but after Jeanne dies will be willing. The last one would be tricky, but what if Bayonetta from France sees her mom being controlled and then is conflicted about shooting her? After a fight with Bayonetta Origin will deliver the final blow to Rosa like normal, and after coming to terms with it being the right thing to do, they fuse. It'll be optional if Bayonetta 1 and 2 can appear in the end, even though they should for this scene.
You didn't cry while I was gone, did you?
But what if instead of their original final climax, they all together summon their contracted demons to ambush Singularity, kinda like they did on the moon? After severely damaging him this way, the other Bayonettas will go back to their own realms the same way Bayonetta 1 and 2 do. The game will proceed as normal from here. I think this way the Bayonettas can all have their strength moments without making them seem weaker than how Bayonetta appeared before. I think we'd also have more of a chance to get to know these Bayonettas while we're in their worlds, but I think that about covers what I'd change. Thanks for joining me today on the personal fixes I'd make to Bayonetta 3. I wanted to make this to show we can still have the story begin and end the same way, but have the supposed Archives band together to stop the threat that faces all of their worlds. I hope you all like this video, and if you have any questions or my choices, or if you're curious about how I'd handle something else, feel free to ask. Also, go ahead and let me know if you agree with any of my changes, or if you have your own ideas for changes. I made it a rule to keep the story close enough, but you all don't have that rule, so go wild. Anyway, I'll see you next time for I don't know what. See you later.